Hello, Emily. Thank you so
Hi.
much for coming on Neuroscience Unplugged today, where we bring lab to life and we bring practical neuroscience to the listeners. We are going to talk about your journey with your health, which
Mhm.
includes managing FND, managing undiagnosed ADHD, dyscalculia, dyslexia, and fibromyalgia.
A whole list. Yeah, I think a lot of people these days are getting diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is quite interesting. What's not so interesting is the aftercare. That's what I've noticed. There is no aftercare, so that's fun. FND, on the other hand, I seem to have had a little bit more support with that, which is quite good. So yeah, I think it will be good to talk a little bit about my journey with that. A journey that's been probably since 2020. Dyslexia I got diagnosed at university with dyscalculia as well. So that's a whole other thing. But fibromyalgia, I got diagnosed in 2020 after I had COVID. I just didn't really recover fully. And my mum had maybe the year previous been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. So they went down that avenue. And then, fast forward a year, and we can go deeper into any of these things if you want me to, but for a timeline, we went, I think it was about a year and a half down the line, and I started experiencing dystonia in my right hand, which was really scary because the only way that they can diagnose FND is by not diagnosing anything else. So they can only get to an FND diagnosis once they're like, you definitely don't have MS, you definitely don't have Parkinson's. They tried, what's it called? Like dopamine pills, essentially. And that really didn't have that much of an effect on it. So it was a sort of dopamine resistant dystonia. And they tried many different things. Not a lot of medication. I kind of vetoed as much medication as possible because I didn't want it to affect my work as much as possible. And yeah, it's just been a long journey, really.
It sounds
Long
like it's
and
a journey, the one you've nurtured resilience throughout, which is
yeah.
something that I really wanted you to come on and focus on, because for me, you are an inspiration with everything that you've been managing throughout your life. And you're still somebody who's very much positive in the sense of, right, let's find a way to get a solution.
Mm,
Let's find a way to work this. Let's manage my symptoms. Let me
mm.
inform everyone about it. It's something you've always been open about.
I think the alternative is to sit there depressed, complaining, and not doing anything. And that is something that I see a lot of people do because they're in a terrible headspace with a lack of support system. And I can totally see why people go down that route. I experience that route at least twice a year, quite deeply and profoundly, when I struggle with my fibromyalgia pain. I think pain is the killer. It's the one that takes over your life. And it's the one that you wake up in pain, you go to bed in pain. When you breathe, you're in pain. When you walk, you're in pain. When you sit in one position for too long, you're in pain. And it's just constant. And I can totally see how people struggle. And I think something really important to consider here is that everyone's symptoms are a spectrum. And something quite controversial, and if you've got a chronic condition, this will trigger you, is to consider how your mental state does affect your pain levels and how you choose to go about your everyday. In the long run, it really, really, really does affect how you manage your symptoms. And I think the one thing that I really saw is that people who were on the fibro forums having a chat, having a moan, they needed that release, but you're almost feeding the fire a little bit with your thought processes around what you can and can't do. And I just didn't find it productive. It wasn't productive for me personally, for the type of person that I am and my lived experience. It didn't help me to be a part of those conversations. It just made me feel worse.
Mm.
And it wasn't an option for me. And I think the thing that I like to say about fibromyalgia is it's pain. It's just pain. It's not hurting me. It's not harming me. And so somewhat I can ignore it. Having said that, I know that there are comorbidities, is that the word, with fibro and many other things. And I think people have a lot of fear that perhaps they've been misdiagnosed. And so they think, well, this pain must be something else. This pain has to be something else. It couldn't possibly just be this. And of course it's damaging me. And of course it's doing these things. But so that's kind of how I see it. I see it as fake pain. It's real pain, but in my head, it's fake pain. And so what's the pain telling me? Like, is the pain telling me to slow down? Is it telling me to hydrate more? Usually it's telling me both, slow down and hydrate. So you do have to try different things to manage it. And that probably has been harder than the FND in many ways. Having said that, the diagnosis process was so long. I'm trying to think how long. Maybe like a year and a half. And that had a huge impact on my mental well-being, because, you know, you go around thinking I could have MS, I could have motor neurons, I could have Parkinson's. That time was a dark time. That time was hard. And every day being a primary school teacher, reminded that my body is not doing what I need it to do, you know, is a really hard thing. Once I had that diagnosis, my symptoms got better. And actually the doctor said that's quite common, because you're not as stressed. And therefore, again, was another confirmation that my mental well-being and how I choose to be has an impact on my symptoms, and on how I can manage my life. And that's kind of how I've gone down that path. There's many, many paths I could have gone down with fibro. Food and what you intake as well. I don't have that much control over that. That's possibly something I would try a bit harder at in the future. But right now,
you're aware it's there in the peripheral vision to work on in the future, right?
Like,
yeah.
But trying different foods, making sure you haven't got, because I have got intolerances as well. That can have a big impact. So anyone listening who has got fibromyalgia, please don't think I discount your lived experience. I am a full-time working person. I find that incredibly hard. I've had to battle changing careers. I will be changing careers. Not, you know, it's a lovely career. I'm very happy about it. But, you know, it's not been easy. Working full-time has not been easy. I have had extended periods of time off due to it. And I know that long-term, this isn't what I choose for myself. But like I say, I don't want people to think I'm discounting their lived experience. Everyone's fibromyalgia journey is different. I do believe, I should also add, for people who are thinking, oh, I've got fibromyalgia and I've got chronic fatigue syndrome, I have a diagnosis of all of those things too, but just to keep it as a broad spectrum, the fibromyalgia diagnosis, along with many other things that come with that, I also do have. And everyone's different. Everyone's got different experiences. With the FND, now that's a crazy spectrum of symptoms. So FND stands for functional neurological disorder. And when I got diagnosed at King's College Hospital in London, which I'm very grateful for, because they're a centre of excellence for Parkinson's and movement disorders. And so I was pretty quickly, if I'm honest, really quickly, put onto a course, which is not very, you know, well offered around the world, certainly not in England as well. And I was on a course with people who couldn't walk and who couldn't cook due to their symptoms. They couldn't do a lot of anything, which you can imagine when you walk in there as a full-time working person, you're like, why the hell am I here? They must think I'm absolutely mad when they're having, you know, such huge symptoms. And I'm here, I can walk, I can talk, I can dress myself, I can cook. But again, FND is a huge, vast array. You can have seizures as well with FND. For me, the prevalent symptoms are transient dizziness. That's annoying. You're walking along and then, oh, there you go. And I'm like, okay, I'm okay. So I've had to have a risk assessment at work because of that. Dystonia in my right hand. Sometimes dystonia in other limbs, but very infrequently.
And is your dominant hand
my right hand?
Yeah.
One of the jobs that I wanted, they gave me a target, like, what do you want to be able to do? And I was like, I just want to be able to write and journal. I still find that hard. So I've lost a little bit of mobility in that hand, which is why they thought, MS, because I still have somewhat a lack of sensation in like my pinky finger, but it's come back a lot more. I crochet now, which is nice. And I've been sort of slowly upping it. I still find journaling very tiring, but I also think because I'm dyslexic and an incredibly slow writer and my brain moves like this, that I've always found journaling helpful, but just annoying for me personally when I'm much more of a speaker than I am a writer.
Have you ever tried verbal journaling?
I think when I have my own device, because I've got my phone, and that just feels like a pit of doom sometimes because I just don't know what's on there half the time and I lose everything, and I'm like, no, I can't use that as an organizational device. But when I do own my own laptop or iPad or something, that has been something I can keep private, because obviously I've always had a work device. But when I can keep something a bit more private, I have thought about doing that as well. So
you can also get a dictaphone. They're completely separate ones that record. So it's just a device on its own. It's got some.
But then I have to listen to my voice back. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, watch yourself, film yourself, and do it.
Oh God, could you imagine? Oh, it'd be like some weird reality TV show.
Would you say that when you're journaling, then the release is actually just writing it down and letting it go? So it's not like you go back and read.
Well, as you well know, I'm a witchy lady, Hema, and I find that I get incredibly insightful messages when I journal in that way, more so than I think your mouth is very conscious, whereas your thought process is very unconscious. And
so, which is why you prefer writing, because that automatic writing is essentially blended in with the journaling, and you get those channel messages as well.
I still do journal prompts as well and things like that.
Yeah,
I do like a good journal prompt. And when I'm in a phase of depression, so I do tend to have a depressive phase at least once a year. Usually around this time of year. I seem to have avoided that, touch wood, this year. But I found journaling my anxiety levels versus my mood and things like that. I would do it in a more scientific way.
Yeah.
Almost to prove that every day is different, and I have my mood is
essentially. I want to touch upon, and it's great that you talked about your timeline, because I know a lot of listeners might be in similar situations where they perhaps don't have a clinical diagnosis yet, and the clinicians may not know what is going on with them.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them? Because when you were at the start of your journey, I know that you said you were quite early on in university when you were 18 and you got your diagnosis of dyslexia and dyscalculia. And then the rest of the health symptoms, when they started coming, what advice could you give people about getting those diagnoses and keeping on top of their own symptoms?
I know they say not to Google things, but let me tell you, half the time doctors are not specialized enough, especially GPs, to know what to do. I think I've seen it with a lot of different people for different things. They've gone to a GP, they've felt really disheartened because someone hasn't listened to them. I know people who've come out of GP appointments crying, walked out even because they're not felt listened to, not felt like they were heard. Go to a different GP. Within that practice, there has to be, 2 GPs, and actually it's none of their business. Like, if you want to be referred to something, be referred to it. You've
really got to put your foot down.
If you have neurological symptoms, you need to be referred. It is not up to anybody else to tell you, just because they're a doctor, that means nothing. They are a GP. They are a general practitioner. They do not know about FND, fibromyalgia, and some of them will have their own opinions on what fibromyalgia is. FND used to be even conversion therapy, conversion something syndrome, conversion something. And that was basically in the I don't even know when, but let's say 60s, 70s. That was just your body not kind of like fibromyalgia, not doing the right thing and showing it in weird ways. And it was a bit of a crappy diagnosis to get, because it didn't really mean anything except that you were a little bit something wrong in the head. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so
And
what you're suggesting to people is that if you know that something is not how it should be, you have to be the one to put your foot down with your local GP and
yeah,
say, I need a referral, I need to get this investigated.
and also just remember that I've had a lot of people look at me like, well, everyone gets diagnosed with fibromyalgia these days. Everyone gets no one knows about functional neurological disorder. That wasn't even touched upon. So just remember that your GP may not even believe you because they don't believe in it. Just how when they had conversion, whatever it was, syndrome or whatever that diagnosis was, that's now changed to be FND. Things always change. They're always growing. They're always learning. But something that we know is that it's very real. And just because one person doesn't believe you or doesn't think it's real doesn't mean you should stop your journey with diagnosis. And also, you need to consider what diagnosis means to you. You have a diagnosis. What now?
How does it
What are
impact
you?
your life? What are
Yeah.
you going
What are
to
you
do
going to
to
do
hopefully
about it?
manage the symptoms?
Yeah. Because when you have a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, there isn't. I can tell you now, there's no magic pill that's going to help you. They
I
can
know
give you
that.
gabapentin. They can give you other pain treatments. But from my understanding is that those pain treatments come with a whole array of symptoms
Side effects.
and side effects.
Yeah, you're absolutely right with that, because the people that I'm aware of got it as well. Same as you, they're very good at managing their symptoms,
Mm.
and they're avoiding medication, which is why they've made lifestyle choices for that reason. So they're constantly researching what is the latest thing that I can do for myself to be able to manage these symptoms, because they know that there's nothing else out there for them. And actually,
It's
now that I
really
think
sad.
about it, you're very similar, all of you, that people who are like, right, what are we going to do for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than waiting for somebody to say, right, this is what you need to do, and laying out a
Mm-hmm.
timetable or telling you this is what you need to do, you're saying, what's right for my body? What am I going
And
to be able to do?
I think a lot of people are waiting for doctors to be like, oh, it's what's the word? An autoimmune disease. It's this, it's that. And then we'll be able to. Don't wait for someone to tell you it's that. Don't wait for somebody to tell you that this is how we can treat it. There's so much research that goes into how trauma and how other things, not always, it can always just be a medical trauma as well. It doesn't even have to be like some massive trauma that's happened in your life or micro traumas throughout your life. Like it can just be that your body got sick and it didn't know what to do with that. And then it's triggered this way of your body now
Yeah.
processing information. And there's no point in asking how it's happened or why it's happened. I know deep down that mine has been a series of traumas over my life, paired with the fact that I got COVID and I wasn't, crazily ill with it. I was pretty damn sick. I had a pretty bad flu. And I have to say, it kind of changed my sense of smell forever. But I recovered, in those 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I wasn't hospitalized, but my body sort of still found that a big challenge, obviously. Teaching. I think teaching's done this to me.
And do you mind sharing with the listeners which age range you teach?
So I teach from early years, like nursery up to year 2 is my specialism. And in the time when I was diagnosed, I was teaching early years. Now, wonderful profession. I love it. It's very worthwhile. But any teacher will understand how understaffed schools are, underfunded schools are, how complex needs have gotten these days. And I want listeners to really understand, like, I'm a great teacher. I have no question of my ability to cope. I don't think it's that. Almost if you care as much as I do, that's the problem, is you overthink things all the time. And that chronic overthinking, that chronic, I'm not meeting these needs of the children, I'm not able to do this because of this, and that kind of like, well, if I had this money, I could buy this. And if I had this adult, I could help this child in this way. And those traumas, waking up every day anxious because I don't have enough adults to manage the needs of my class. And this is not the school that I'm currently at. So if anyone is currently watching this and thinks, oh my goodness, she's talking about the school she's in, I'm not at all. This goes as a overarching umbrella for my teaching career, which has been about 10 years now. And, you have a variety of classes with a variety of needs, and every year is different, right? Every day is different. But I used to wake up with crippling anxiety of not knowing who was going to help me. And I must also say, this is not now. You know, I'm not talking about the school that I'm at now. In the past, and we're talking a few years ago, pre-COVID, I didn't know who was going to help me. I didn't know if there would be an SLT member to help me if, you know, shit hit the fan. And I didn't feel supported. And it was scary because you're in charge of these children and you don't really know what to do. Now, I did have other things. I had a death of a family member. I had other things going on mentally, but I was very mentally unwell, and I ended up getting signed off with stress for, I think it was 4 weeks. So that was a combination of vascular anxiety and a pretty dramatic bereavement.
You're suggesting, so as well as the profession, not
Mm-hmm.
profession teaching itself, but the job itself,
Mm-hmm.
and also what was going on in your personal life,
Mm-hmm.
and also you had your health diagnosis
Mm-hmm.
going on. So how did you start to navigate that? Because like you said, you know, every day it sounded like there was a constant upheaval. There was just no, you know, stability there. Like how do you deal with that? How do you start to even deal with that day to day without just saying
I don't think I did. I think I was in. So one of the things that they've said is, and I've had multiple therapists say to me now, is that my body is kind of in a constant fight or flight. And I've had to learn to help my body get out of that. Now, they say if your body is in, and I can't quote anybody, but I know from podcasts and research and everything else, they say if your body is in a constant fight or flight, that eventually it will start to shut down in different ways.
It does. Essentially, fight or flight is our body's way of protecting us to make sure it doesn't get any worse. But of course, if we keep it in that period for such a long duration, like you said, it will then lead to other things. Because we often think, oh, you know, why is it happening?
I think I was in fight or flight for a big chunk of my childhood. And then I don't think I fully got out of that. I don't think I recognized it as that, but I don't think I got out of that. It didn't hit me until I was about 16, and that was my first bout of therapy. Then I had uni, which was great. I loved uni, but I did have anxiety and very low self-worth and all that stuff that comes with that.
Would you say that with your symptoms of anxiety that you only really, when you went to therapy at 16, realised what it was, but it was normal for you to think?
So I went to therapy because I actually had a really bad relationship with my brother, who I now love. It was just that I had a lot of old thought processes regarding him, my biological dad, our childhood experience that I had to work through. And it wasn't until I was in a relationship, my first relationship when I was like 15, and I got into it and I realized being vulnerable with someone that I had a lot of problems with connection. And at the time, it was having an impact on my brother. So I had to go through, that was my first bout. And then I did have some more when I was older and a little bit more after that. And I've kind of been in and out of it ever since then. But I just think staying in fight or flight for so long and then going into a profession where it can feel like that, you're in fight or flight every day, because you have to push your emotions down and you have to be calm, collected, and in control every single day in situations which you have no control over.
Absolutely, hit the nail on the head. It's external situations we don't have any control over, but everything that you can be controlled.
And actually, I think I just continued to be in a state of fight or flight, and I still don't think I've managed to fully overcome that. I was actually thinking, when did I overcome that? And I'm like,
But that's interesting you say that, because there's a lot of people similar to you, like you said, you've been in a state of fight or flight for so long that it's almost become the norm for you.
Yeah, I don't know the difference.
Yeah, you don't know what it's like to not. And I know that a lot of people can relate to that. Because if you don't know what it feels like not to be in flight or fight, how do you come back to that? What do you work towards? Because you don't actually have anything to compare it to. So you don't know how your nervous system's going to react. You don't know how you're going to react in those situations because you've always been in that state of fight or flight, especially when we talk about, and you said this earlier, it's not always a major trauma that has to have happened to you. All these micro traumas that soon add up. especially as children. And come on, as children, we're constantly like, it's our feelings that feed into it. It's not actually sometimes that what happens to us. It can often be how we're feeling about something. And as a child, we can't always communicate in the way that we know. And that often
And
is in our body.
I think what's helped me to understand my condition is I've had the brain scans. Like I've not got any tumors. I've not got Parkinson's. I saw the lovely little comma shape that I'm meant to have in my dopamine whatevers, and I saw all the things, and it was all fine. I truly believe that when we understand the brain a bit more, and we're starting to, that people will realize that fibromyalgia and FND are massively part of trauma, if not only trauma, because everyone who I've spoken to, who have my mum included, I won't speak for her, but she's had her own things in her own life. Everyone's had something. The people who I saw with FND they didn't necessarily have, again, an array of different things, a couple of medical things that had led to it, but nonetheless, the body felt like it was under pressure. And your brain looked after itself in the best way that it possibly could.
So there is a field of study called psychoneuroimmunology where it does actually look at your mental state and how it's related to the nervous system and the immune system specifically. And they do talk about what you've said. They have found the connections between how, of course, what goes on in our minds and how we respond to that and how it is then stored in our immune systems and our nervous systems. Understandably, they're all connected, right? I know we have all our different sciences that study the heart, study the mind, study the back, etc. But we look at ourselves holistically. We are human beings, right? Our systems all interact with each other. So, of course, there's not going to be one part that is not going to be affected by the other, right? You can't have something without the other. We know that causation effect is very real. And often, and this is the thing with our Western methodologies, is we look at symptoms alone. And you said yourself, when you're going through your diagnosis at the start, it had to be symptom-based. But of course, they all relate. If you look at the diagnostics, the DSM, Statistic Manual, which has all the rundowns of all the disorders, you will find so many symptoms cross over, right? So if you're looking at symptoms alone, of course, you're going to have to go through so many different tests to understand what's going on. And somebody like yourself who's very resilient and said, right, I'm going to get to the bottom of it. I'm going to try and find something that I can manage my symptoms at. Not everybody is like that, which is why I'm so curious to get your story out there, because I want people to see that it is possible to keep going and trying to find this, because we have to understand humans, we're not symptom-based. There's fundamental, when we look at soul, mind, body, spirit, everything is connected. So, for example, if you're feeling stuck in this life, or you're feeling alone or isolated, how that impacts our body, how it impacts our mind, that isn't always taken into account. And like you said, the microtraumas from younger, there are so many symptoms that correlate. But unfortunately, our Western methodologies are only based on, right, Emily, I've got 10 minutes. What are your symptoms? That's essentially what it's like when you go to your GP. They literally have 10 minutes, right? And they ask you, okay, what's going on today? And you're like, well, I've got a headache. I've had it for 2 weeks. I've lost perhaps feeling. I know that you said, in your right hand, there's, and I felt some dizziness. And I'm like, okay. So they'll go through some,
But also, can I just add to that quickly? There are so many symptoms that you wouldn't even realize are symptoms of your central nervous system being in overdrive. Like even having sensitive bladder, even having dry mouth and dry eyes, and all of these completely seemingly random symptoms that make you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm losing my mind. This couldn't possibly be related. And I think you need to, first of all, if this is your journey, just start writing down everything. But the problem is, where your attention goes to is where it grows. So the minute you start thinking about something, and that's why my dystonia got worse. And anyway, you do need to track your symptoms, because anything can be a symptom. And I literally went with a whole list going from mild to moderate to severe. And I just blurted them out like word vomit to the neurologist, who was able to go bup, 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 and was able to go, these ones all linked together. Maybe go and get a look at those ones, because those are not necessarily linked, but 75% of them all linked together, ones that I didn't even think would
But
link.
we often can't be observers of our own health, right? Like you said, we can't always know that that's not normal, especially if you, from a young age, like you said, you've had certain symptoms, that becomes normal for you. So you
Yeah.
wouldn't ever think, okay, this is a symptom that somebody else doesn't experience. You don't go around talking about these symptoms to your friends, do you? Until, like you said, you went to therapy at 16.
Yeah.
And you started to realize a lot of things, and it sounds like you then started your own journey of discovering, what is it that I need, what is it that I need to move on from, what is it that I need to work on. Like you said, your relationship with your brother is an example. So you went out of your way to study what you needed, and as
I
you
was
said,
kind of
you're aware.
forced. But yeah.
No, you know what, Emily, you say that, right? But this is what I talk about when I talk about resilience, right? So many people like yourself who are naturally resilient don't realize this, but you are the ones that will constantly be learning. You won't be waiting for others to say, right, Emily, this is what you need to do. So whatever your symptoms are, whatever you're suffering with,
I
somebody
think
will
I
say,
was
right,
bred
I'm
to
going
be
to do it.
resilient, though. They say that a lot of undiagnosed dyslexics and a lot of people who have undiagnosed autism, ADHD, I think it's a bit different if it's autism as well, because you're in sensory overload all the time as well. But I definitely think with specifically learning disorders like dyslexia and things like that, you're so used to feeling a certain way and having to try. Literally having this conversation with my brother, who was like a straight A student, was the best of his class all the time, terrified of making mistakes now. Literally hates it, can't make mistakes. And we were having this discourse about, how we can help him with his resilience and what to do with it. And so I do feel like I am resilient, because I think I always had to be. And I do recognize everyone's is different for different reasons and different factors. But what to do about it? That's the question, isn't it? Because people will be listening to this and go, so how do we overcome it?
I think you've already started to give them a lot of inspiration of what they can start doing, like so tracking their symptoms, even ones that they're not aware of may not be, maybe talking to their GP that this is, what reoccurs in my body, this is what's going on. And it sounds like you're also suggesting like you have to be on top of your own health. You have to be the one to push for that diagnosis or push for that test. You have to be the one on top of the GP, not the other way around. And to do your own research as well.
And it's uncomfortable. You don't feel good during that period. It is uncomfortable to say to doctors, actually, no, I'm going to get a second opinion. And I'm very lucky. I think the thing to remember is that I have been so blessed to my doctor's surgery. I realized I was sat in there the other day and it was like King's College partnered with. And I was like, of course, like, I'm in Lewisham and I got referred to King's College Hospital for this. And I got to get a diagnosis with top people. And that has been incredibly helpful in my journey. There were people coming up and doing the FND course from like in the Midlands and from down south, because this was the top, the creme de la creme of treatment. So I was really lucky to do that. And they described it as asthma. They were like, sometimes you're going to be good. Sometimes you're not going to be good. I said, will this be made worse if I ever get pregnant? What will happen? And they said, no, it shouldn't affect you, but like asthma, it might get worse, it might get better. Will it go away? We don't know.
You know what? And what's really good about what the team are being very realistic with you. I think that's a really good thing. They're being very honest and they're saying, look, we don't know all the answers. Like so far, the research and has proven that it won't, but we don't know. Like you said, if you get pregnant, we don't know if it's. And I think that's a good place to be, because often with medical practitioners, they can say, yeah, everything's gonna be fine. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
And they weren't neurologists either. I actually didn't. I believe. So I'm trying to remember now. I think I got referred to like neurophysiology or something, whatever it was called. I got discharged from neurology, and then I got pushed into that. And who I saw was actually a therapist and a physio.
Were
who
your physical
specialised.
symptoms more severe? Is that why they referred you across?
They just referred. They said it's basically the treatment was a 3-day. You went 2 days a week for 3 weeks, from the morning till the afternoon, and you had a CBT session. You had a physio session.
So just for listeners who don't know, CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a talk therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you said you got physio, which is a physiotherapy.
Mm-hmm. And you had your lunch there, which was provided for by the NHS. It was very nice of them. And they gave a kind of lecture, a talk on FND, and they taught you about FND. And you worked in a group with 3 other people, and that was what happened. And that's what really made me open my eyes to how severe FND could be, because I hadn't had that. I felt very out of depth, actually. And actually thinking back to it, it made me really feel uncomfortable to go there and be like, I've taken someone's place who potentially can't walk. And, they said it's not about that. Like, your main symptom is pain, and, you can't see that. I'm very lucky that I haven't necessarily had it. It has affected my walking before, but luckily it didn't manifest itself in that way, nor in seizures. I have had pretty nasty bouts of disassociation, though, because of it. And it was very informative.
Clinicians said that the dissociation was in relation to the FND.
It's all linked. It's all a protective thing. I didn't even realize that that's what I was experiencing. He said to me that dissociation can look different in different people who have a complete, where they completely lose track of time and things like that. And he was like, do you experience X, Y, and Z? And I was like, yeah, like loads of times. He was like, that's dissociation. And that's the way your body's protecting yourself. But it's all linked. And what they described, for anyone who's trying to understand FND and why they thought this would be helpful, dystonia is basically where my hand contracts into different positions, and I also get head tics because of it. I can feel it happening. It's like a sneeze is going to come on, and that's how I can feel that the dystonia is going to happen. It's like, oh, what's going to happen?
It's a precursor to say, like, it's about to come. So you're
yes,
you've tuned into your body that much that you're aware now.
I know now, yeah, when it's going to happen. And like, I had dinner on Saturday, and Josh was like, what was that? And I was like, what do you mean, what was that? He was like, you just made a pained expression, and like, you just did something really weird with your face. And I was like, oh, I put my hands under the table so that you can't see that it's happening. It's because I'm having to like play with my fingers or distract my mind away from it happening, and I have to take a deep breath and relax my body and like relax my muscles and remind my brain that it doesn't have to exhibit symptoms in this way. Because they explained it to me like, I've been walking down to a beach my whole life on a path, which is my brain. The beach is my brain, people. And one day something happened where my brain went, oh, let's walk down a different path through the sand dunes. And it started to make a different path. And now all of a sudden the other path is being covered up with sand because it's not being walked as much. And you have a new path, a new neural pathway that leads you to the beach that you're not meant to use. So now my body's like, stress, dystonia. Stress, pain. Stress, extreme fatigue. And what we have to do is kind of remold our brains into using the correct way and the correct forms. And the reason they did the CBT was tackling the fight or flight, I think, tackling the mental side of it and the psychological side of it. And the physio is trying to work out how you can have a better quality of life, whilst also proving to you very smartly that it's fake. So I was feeling like I was going to lose control, or I was feeling like, oh, I feel like my leg is not moving at the same speed as my other leg, or when I walk down the stairs, I feel like I'm going to miss a step. And she would video record me with the iPad to do because when you can see it, you can realize your brain is tricking you and that everything is fine. So there were lots of ways that they were able to help you face that and learn that you just need to ignore it. That's what I took from this freaking 3 weeks, was that I have to ignore it.
But you have to not feed it. And I want to just touch base on what you said, that, you were, I think you were at dinner in public and you were with Josh.
Yeah.
And you said that, you had to make sure that your hands, were out of line. And,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking the mental processes and pressure of having to do that when you're in the presence of others, while you're
It's
out.
annoying if it's just he and I'm in a restaurant with just ourselves. I actually don't know why. Sometimes, like if I've had a really long day at work, I'll be in a staff meeting because you have to do staff meetings one day a week at least, and I can feel that my body is starting to relax, so I'll tick or I'll twitch, and then I'll get dystonia, and I find that if someone asks me about it, so like I might find that after this meeting, my dystonia will be worse for a day or two. Because again, I've put focus on it and my body's like, it's like a little gremlin that's trying to get me to do these ways to keep me safe. I don't know.
Well,
So I
essentially,
have
because
to
you said that,
ignore it.
I love the way that the team described about the neural pathways, because I think it's great that, like you said, you just need to stay on that road. You need to not
Yeah.
get distracted by all the ones that are coming that way. And like you said, your obviously your previous pathways are still there, so often it will just go
Yes.
there because it's autopilot essentially, right? Our brain, and we need to keep going on the journey of relearning those neural pathways. I mean, yes, we know our brains are neuroplastic. We know that they're malleable, but that doesn't mean that we can just sit there and allow it to do what it needs to do. We have to understand and know, like you said yourself, that you are training it, and you know that, okay, I need to maybe not talk about it. I need to maybe not focus on it, because then I need to focus on being able to do other things, and that keeps everything on the journey that it should. And this is where I talk about resilience, because you're having to train your brain simultaneously to making sure that those symptoms don't go down that pathway. So it's almost building that block as well in between to say, nope, Emily, what you doing? We're not going to go down that route.
Literally, like even now I'm like fiddling because we're talking about it, and you need to, they said if you give your hand something else to do, it will also make it less likely that it will happen, and all of these things. But I think the alternative HEMA is what? Not work, not have passions, not have drives, not have a life. Like that was the alternative.
So you're saying the reason why you choose to nurture your resilience is because of the alternative of, like you said, not having a life, not being able to
Giving
work,
up.
not to socialize, not be able to do nice things.
Yeah. And also, I'm a massive control freak, which is probably linked down to, trauma and life and unexpected experiences in life and things, right? And the idea of perfectionism only started after I had CBT at the FND clinic. It wasn't something that, because we kind of laugh about it in teaching, like all teachers are perfectionists, all teachers, like things to be done in a certain way. But it made me realize the impact. Where did that come from? How is it having an impact on me now? And that idea of control, when I didn't know what was wrong, I had no control. Now that I do know what's wrong, I can do my own research. I can try these different things. I can give myself the grace. Don't get me wrong. I will give myself the grace of having time off, which is why I'm having to rethink careers, because this isn't sustainable long term. But those are my ways of controlling something that feels out of control.
So
and I think that's my coping mechanism.
Yeah, and you're saying that are you saying that if you're a perfectionist, you go into teaching, or if you become a teacher and you're a perfectionist? Just checking in on there for those that think you're going to teaching.
I think we all want to help, but we also, a lot of teachers have their own traumas because we want to help.
We want to make sure that people are not going through what we ever did, so we want to make sure their lives are better.
Of course.
That I can relate to as an educator.
I think we are all, and also we have to be so organized, and we understand what happens when a lesson is not organized and well prepared. Shit hits the fan, and the pace is out, and the behavior's out, and all of these balls that you're juggling all the time. And I think even if you weren't a particularly perfectionist person, like I know of one or two teachers who are not. Don't get me wrong,
who are not perfectionists.
No, but I would say a good 70%.
But is that by your standards or?
No. I mean, there are a few knights in shining armors who have been in my life and kind of taught me, like, there's only so much you can do, and you have to let it go. And I realized I couldn't do that, and that's why I need to leave teaching. So
No, I think this is exactly it. I think the route that you've chosen is what is right for you and your health, and what you know is impacting you. Because by the sounds of it, and I'm assuming, so correct me if I'm wrong, everything that you're having to contend with during the week, just to be able to, you know, be in full-time work, I'm sure has a knock-on effect in the evenings and weekends, right?
It's ridiculous. Like, I am happy, jolly. I'm a relatively happy-go-lucky person. I'm a pretty grumpy person. Like, people don't always see that. I'm a Cancerian, so I'm a pretty grumpy person, but also a happy-go-lucky person.
We say that you're sensitive, you Cancerians.
Oh, I'm so sensitive. But but also, well, we're not going to go down the astrology route because Cancerians have a lot more than that. But I'm exhausted, Huma. I'm so tired all the time that my level of exhaustion varies. And what usually happens is that, unfortunately, and it actually makes me feel very emotional because I don't want to leave teaching, but it's my path, it's where I'm at in life. And I have to choose. I have to choose between having energy and teaching and having a quality of life. Because I can't have both. I can't work from 7 a.m. until 5 o'clock at night every day with all of those hours being emotionally draining. You know, I can't do it. And for anyone who has got a chronic condition, it's okay to say that you're grieving a life that you had before, because you will have to grieve it. You will have to grieve it. Like, you are going to have to make adjustments. But at the end of the day, I've also been incredibly open with work about everything that's happening. And I let them know that if I'm having time off, it's because I absolutely need to. And it's much better for me to look after myself now, have 2-3 days off rather than have like 2 weeks off. Right. But I struggle. And I don't think I realize how much I struggle until my body goes, now you must stop. Now you must stop. We're going to make you. And I have to choose. My husband will get home and he'll be like, what did you do today? And I'm like, I did blah, 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 blah. And I'll do like a list of things. And he's like, that's too much. But if I was to do that and teach and socialize, like even now I'm having to have conversations with my friends and advocate for myself and be like, actually, I can't drive for 3.5 hours to go to a lovely trip that you want to plan, like a wonderful thing. That's a wonderful idea. And I really love that. But logistically, I can't drive for 3.5 hours. It will flare me up from the stress of driving for that long and then having to walk around doing those things, socializing, draining my battery in that way. I'm very lucky I have a husband who allows me to have a lot of alone time and allow me to socially, decompress and rest. So yeah, you do have to make adjustments. And I've come to terms with that now, but what are we, 2025? And I got diagnosed in 2023. It's taken 2 years for me to get to a point where financially I can consider this, and emotionally I can consider this. It is a big thing.
Absolutely. I can only imagine what you had to do to go through that. And I want to circle back to when you said when you made the decision about teaching, and you're having to say to management, right, I need to take some time out because I know I need to. Do you think somewhere down the line you also try and overcompensate for when you do work?
I think I naturally always have. I've always been the person who wants to be the best. And I think that that's been a narrative that I've had to explore, an inner narrative. So something we tell ourselves, a belief that we have. And they say that a belief is just something that you tell yourself again and again and again. And it's not. And I've had to explore my belief systems. What do I tell myself? And that's what CBT has done for me, is it's given me the ability to look at my mind and go, but why do I feel that way? Where did that come from? And how is that true? And how is that helpful now? Because I innately am someone who will give all or nothing, and I don't rest very well. I've had to learn how to have rest and play, which is why I started to crochet. I've had to learn how to find joy in small things. And I've had to learn how to advocate for myself, even when I feel disappointed in my body for what is happening. I've had to have a level of acceptance for what it is, because guess what? People don't give a shit. If you're making their life hard, they're not gonna, you can't always expect someone to hold your hand and go, it's okay. You have time off, my love, because you're making their life difficult. And for all the love in the world, they do care about me, but when they already are overworked themselves, or maybe you've got a big assignment due, or maybe you've got this or that, like, we can't always expect people to care about us as much as we care about ourselves, which is why you have to advocate for yourself the most and kind of just tell everything else that it doesn't matter. And that, I think, is quite anxiety driving for a lot of people. And actually, it's disappointing sometimes when people are not as caring as you want them to be, but just because they're not caring doesn't mean you don't deserve that time off and that rest. So and the more you rest,
don't base your reactions and not standing up for yourself on the fact that other people may not give you the answer that you're looking for, but that shouldn't stop you.
They won't. They won't. And that's also been a hard pill to swallow. Has been having that anxiety to ring up on the phone in the morning to say I'm not coming in today, and I'd say 50% of the time I get the reaction I want. But everyone's got their own stuff going on, and it makes you feel a bit rubbish sometimes. And that's not going to go away.
Other people's reactions, right?
Yeah, even family members. I've got family members who don't fully understand fibromyalgia, and they're quite active, so they're always like, come on, you can do it. And I'm like, no, I actually can't, but okay, thank you. And it comes from a place of love, and it comes from a place of them wanting me to be a part of whatever is going on and not feel singled out, and I think in their own way feel supported, motivating me to do more,
to remind you that that's an option. But sometimes it can feel awful because it can remind you that you're not in a space that you can do it right now. What would you suggest to listeners who perhaps are coming against family and friends and work that aren't necessarily as supportive as they'd want to? What could individuals do themselves? Could they share some information with them? Could they share them how their symptoms affect them so that they're more aware? What has been helpful for you on your journey?
I think it depends on where you are emotionally. I would say if you're in any stage where you would consider yourself depressed, I would say you need to deal with that first before you can even think about how it might be impacting other people. Yeah. Because you're not going to be in a place to manage and even hold space for family members during that time. And I'm very, very blessed because on one hand, I've had a partner who has been through me in this process. But on the other hand, he is someone who has never had to deal with any of these things. And it wasn't until he had sciatica and he was like, oh, God, this is terrible. I'm like, oh, God, this is terrible, isn't it? Imagine feeling in pain every day of your life. And that was terrible. I shouldn't have used that against him. But
it's a reality check, right?
Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think since then he has softened, I think he's understood what it's like to be in pain, because that sciatica was pretty bad. He had it for a few weeks and wasn't nice at all. And I've had to take him to the side. He's not always said the right things or done the right things. So I had to take my partner to the side and say, actually, I really need your support. It makes me feel, I got cross, I got angry, which is typical Emily fashion. And he said, all you need to do is tell me. So if you will get it wrong. You will snap at your loved ones. You will have arguments. But at the end of the day, he said to me, you need to tell me how you're feeling so I can support you. So you need to try and find a communication style that works for you and your family members, works for you and your friends. Again, my friends have always just said, you just need to tell us, because they don't always think about these things. Like when they're planning long trips, they're thinking it's going to be lovely, but they're not necessarily thinking about, and sometimes I'm fine and sometimes I'm not fine and all of that. So I actually think it always is a bit hard now certain conversations don't come up because I've asked my husband to kind of defend me a little bit within social settings or with family, and he's getting better at that because he understands what to say now. I think getting a formal diagnosis helps them to see that it's real as well. I think we also have to think about the effect it has on your loved ones. You being sick and you having extended periods where you can't do much. And I think you do need to think about yourself, but you also need to think about the effect that it has on those people, and take that into consideration. Just stand up to yourself in a very calm, because guess what? People will think we're, losing our minds if we're shouting at people all the time and we're flipping off the handle. And if you can talk in a calm way, this is what I need. I understand how that sounds. I know, it sounds weird, but, by the way, websites and things, if that would help people understand, send it to them. But everyone comes at different times in their life, at different stages in their life. Family members, friends, they don't always know how to react to things. And we are being an inconvenience to them. Let's be honest. They can say all the nice things in the world, but we are being an inconvenience. And again, just like with bosses at work, you have to be the person who stands up for yourself. And you have to be the person to advocate for yourself, because it's no one else's job. It's your job.
And also other people don't know. Like you said, we can maybe teach them, and I'm going to use Josh as an example. Like he only really experienced a fraction of what you have to go through on a daily basis. And now he's more understanding. And we're not saying the solution is for everyone to have to go through a fraction of it, or
just put extreme pain on them for an extended period of time, and then they'll understand.
They've done that with men, actually, and this is not comparable, but they've got the period pains.
Oh yes,
on the men. You've seen them, right? And you can see within a second they
look at their partners like, my goodness, right? Especially women who suffer with endometriosis, and they're like, guess what, I'm at a 10 pretty much all the time, and I have to go about my business.
So I think like you said, Josh is more understanding now, but you, as well as having to deal with how you need to stay contained, like you said, you have to make sure you stay calm, make sure you move forward and treat your own symptoms and manage your own health. You're also having to understand how you can talk to others about it to make sure that they understand. Like you said, you've had to then talk to Josh and say, right, I need you to help me in social situations. You have to think for yourself, like, okay, what is going to serve me better moving forward?
Yes.
And you always have to, it sounds like you're just always having to stay 10 steps ahead of everything to make sure that you're almost going back to that whole control again, because that it has a knock-on effect on your symptoms. Because if you didn't, perhaps you felt stressed in that situation because people are like, oh, come on, Emily, just get up, let's just go for a walk and everything. You're like, I can't. And then you're like trying to like contain your anger or your aggression, like just saying, look, I can't, please.
And the emotion, shame. That's the kicker. And even today, when I had to message them and be like, I really don't know if this is a good idea for me, you do get that shame of letting people down. And I think I feel it, I understand it, and I let it go, because there's nothing I can do about it. And boundaries are a thing that I've had to be working on the last few months. They've kind of been a focus for me. But yeah, I really, really empathize with people who feel that shame, because that's a real kicker, especially people, you care about people, you want people to be happy, and you almost blame yourself for not being able to do those things. But things will always shift. I don't want people to think like I've got it sussed. I've not. I definitely I've had quite a lot of like exercise anxiety and things like that, because that usually triggers some symptoms in me. So that is like, when eventually I do leave full-time teaching, that's definitely going to be a focus for me, because I need that recovery day and I don't actually have that option at the moment. So yeah, I'm not happy with like my level of movement. And they do say that if you very slowly get used to it, because you can't like boom and bust, and you've got to pace yourself. And the FND clinic did say to me, you can do light exercise. It really just needs to be developed so slowly, or
Give your
you will have
time,
knock-on
your body
effects.
and mind to get used to.
Yeah, that you're
Recognize
not
some
attacking it,
symptoms
essentially.
worsen. What would
So
you
no,
say?
I've definitely not got it sussed out, but I've got a
Well,
lot of things
but
sussed
this
out.
is the thing, right? This is Emily. Ever since I've known you, right? I know we've professionally been working together like the last 6 months, but I've known you personally way much longer than that. You've always come across very confident, like you said, and you have got everything together. And honestly, I don't change that opinion even after everything you said, because like you said, we can't control everything that happens in our life. We don't know what goes on with our health every day, but if you are at least looking to understand what it is you can do for yourself, for me, that is somebody who has got it together, because we cannot all be exactly right every single day of our life, right?
God no.
But if you know that, you know what, I'm gonna do my level best to get through this, for me, that is somebody who's got it together. And after everything you've experienced from young up till now, like, damn, like, you're not, some people don't even experience one of those symptoms all their lives, right? But you've got multiple diagnoses that really impact you mentally and physically. And yet you'll say, oh, you know what? I'm going to give everything a go, because what's the other option? I don't have a life. I don't do the things I don't want to enjoy. I'm still going to be in pain. I'm still going to have those symptoms. And if anything, I might have more time to think about those symptoms because I've nothing else to look forward to. So you're choosing the path of living life. And for me, that's what I've got from this conversation of how you nurture your resilience. Because the other option is you go back to living a life where you are in constant pain.
And it makes you worse because you're just thinking about it all the time. But I'm very lucky. I feel as though from my spiritual perspective, it's kind of opened up a lot of doorways for me to help people. Hence the tarot cards, people, if you're watching, and the candle that's been lit and all of that lovely stuff. I do feel like there's a purpose here. And I think if you can't see the purpose, or if there's, sometimes it's not a purpose, sometimes it's just, this is what we're given. But I do feel like there's a purpose. And I'm going to be controversial. I'm grateful most of the time that I got fibromyalgia, because it forced me to slow down. And it forced me to realize that my lifestyle wasn't sustainable. And it made me have boundaries. And it made me think of a lot of things that I didn't want to think about or even realize I had to think about. And without that, I would probably be like a phase leader on burnout, still wondering why, maybe even getting towards like deputy headship, like assistant headship, like going down that path of working. And that's a beautiful path for some people, but that's not my path. And I've got a new path. And I do, and grounding and being outside, and there's so much we can learn through nature. And it's a beautiful thing. There's so many natural ways to holistic therapies.
They and often very much like you said, you've been
We're losing the light.
gratitude for getting the fibromyalgia. And this is
Yeah.
often what happens with our bodies, brains, is we will keep getting symptoms until we listen to them and say, right, what am I going to do about this? Because very much like you said, you could continue down that path and easily go down deputy head or become a head teacher, ignoring what your body's trying to tell you and saying, this is not the right path for you right now, Emily. You need to slow it down. It will continue and it will just grow. And very much like you said, when you're back at the FND clinic, you had people that couldn't even walk, right? And often leaving something for a prolonged period can have that effect because you are just not listening. And we know the signs, like it's literally a slap in the face because it forces you to stop. It's like, okay, Emily, you're not listening to us. You need to stop.
Do you want to know something amazing? Obviously no one, I don't think I'm breaking any anonymity because nobody knows the people that I was with. It'd only be the people who were there who would know who I was talking about, and that would be fine. One person, I won't even gender them, couldn't walk, had a tremor so bad they couldn't walk without a stick, and they couldn't make a cup of tea because of the hot water going everywhere. And it was an awful life for them. they had an active life previously and they didn't have an active life now. You know, someone who's like in their late 50s, who's had a wonderfully active life.
Still very young.
And they had a medical thing which led to this. And guess what? By the end of it, those 3 weeks, that person was walking without a stick, was practicing with the physio, making their own cup of tea.
Wow.
And you know what changed? Mindset and belief he could get better. Damn it, I just gendered them. Belief that they could get better.
That is amazing.
It's quite phenomenal. I think all of us were near tears when we were seeing this person trying, because it was a really grumpy person who was really struggling emotionally. And how many people are told to just grin and bear it and get on with it, and without facing up to some stuff. And having that combination of therapy, having that combination of physio, and learning about the condition works, because it is mindset.
Like you said,
it's
that
true.
team and that workshops, they obviously showed you options, you know, which other people may not have even realized. Not everyone has the foresight to know this is an option, or the medical resources. And like you said,
It gives you faith, I think.
Yeah. That it's
I
possible
think
to manage them.
you allow yourself to believe, and you allow yourself to try when you're being told by a medical professional that you can do it. And then when you start to see the results and you start to do certain things, it starts to get better. Now, I don't know how long that's lasted for. I haven't spoken to them. However, I know through my own lived experience that symptoms did come back, but it's something you have to try every day. But if you're going to moan about it or you're going to try, you have to choose one. There is no other option. Like, I'm very lucky. My husband's very black and white. And if I'm laying there crying on the bed after he's tried to comfort me, sometimes he doesn't even try to comfort me anymore. He's like, well, Emily, what's your choice? Like, he knows when to and when not to, when I need a firm word, and when, obviously, he knows cyclically that we're more sensitive in certain times. However, and, you know, I think he learns pretty quick when I may be the other way.
He just throws a chocolate and then runs away.
Literally. So yeah, you do need a firm hand sometimes. You will get lost in your emotions. I get lost in my emotions. I get grumpy. I get down. And it's fluid. Sometimes it's just bad. And like I say, I felt really crap in October. But guess what? Work was crap. Work was crap. It was so crap. And I'm happy to say that. And I don't care who sees it. Like, when you're struggling for one reason or another, do you know what I mean? And I started to realize that my everyday again was having an impact on my life and was having an impact on my symptoms. And it was in that moment that I was like, no, I can't do this. This is it. And it was being able to say to myself, this is it. This is the last year. I'm going to work full time. I can't do this anymore. If I was still working full time, I don't even know how. I think I would be signed off with stress by now. Like, if I was still in that mindset of I have to do this again in September, work that hard to get everyone situated, I don't think I would mentally be at work right now.
Which is why you've made the decision, and you've already started putting the new venture in place. And
yes,
okay, so to wrap this up, let's key points that you would give to summarize others who perhaps suspect they have similar symptoms to yourself, similar diagnosis, or perhaps people who are going through this journey themselves and have received a diagnosis. What would you say, if you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
I would do a triangulation. I would do your own research, get the ball rolling with tracking your symptoms, going to your GP, because it takes a long time. And the symptoms of FND and fibromyalgia can look the same as many other very nasty conditions. And it's much better to get those, even if you just go and get blood work to make sure it's not those sorts of things, just get the ball rolling. So yeah, I would do your own research, get the ball rolling with like symptoms and with diagnosis, and maybe if you can afford it, go to therapy. If you can't afford it, then reading books like The Body Knows the Score and things like that, and doing your own research into how mindfulness can support some neurological conditions will really
Just
help
to
you.
pause you there, because with NHS GP here, you can self-refer to talk therapy. So, if you said people who can't afford it. So for those listening, if you do want it, yes, we have a waiting list, understandably, but you can get online and in-person therapy. You can self-refer.
Yeah, and I think I got CBT pretty quick.
Yeah, they're normally quite good within 2 or 3 months. I mean, you normally get, a telephone assessment within 7 working days. And then within, they'll give you a time frame and say, okay, this is what we suggest. If you want to go ahead, this is the waiting list. But I would always suggest putting yourself on there. And you can find that through IAPT online if you're UK
Yeah,
based.
that was who I did. IAPT.
Sorry,
CBT, and it was fine. No. I do think do the free one, but if you can afford it, pay. So much better.
How would you, on that note, find a suitable therapist? Because say, for example, you've never had talk therapy before and you're going through something, and that's already overwhelming to then have to go through directory upon directory because there are so many therapists out there. How did you discover which one was right for you?
Goodness gracious, it was so many years ago. It was when I was signed off with stress, and I needed something. I was desperate. And it wasn't cheap. And it just so happened that in my life, I'd had a sum of money given to me by a grandma, like a couple thousand, and I had saved some for a holiday, but I kept and I used the rest of that for therapy, basically. And it worked. It was powerful I don't know what the difference is, but she just was very good. And I think I went online. Knowing me, I probably looked at 3 different websites, got an idea for some things, and I saw that she was quite close to me. You could see the address. I sent an email. Usually they do a cheaper session or a free session to see if you're a good fit. And let me emphasize that you must see if they're a good fit for you. Because I had bereavement counseling with a man, and I don't feel like, because it was a bereavement about a man who had been abusive, I didn't feel like it was a great fit, and I don't think I got the most out of it that I could have. So I do think you need to make sure you're a good fit for that. But like I say, if you don't want to go down that route, there's so much other research you can do about even just holistic therapies, ways to remain grounded and calm. All that mindfulness shit will help you, I promise. Like, it does help.
It really does. We've got the science to prove it as well now, but you're giving lived experience that that it's tried and tested. You're saying that it has actually worked.
Oh, it does. I'd say it's probably one of the only things that works, is to kind of calm the mind down and teach your brain to work in a different way.
Absolutely. You have given so many amazing takeaways for those listening, and genuinely thank you for opening up about your journey. It's been incredible to learn more myself as well about what you go through on a day-to-day basis, and what you're having to do mentally as well, because that is draining in itself, let alone having to combat everything. And
I got used to it. I think sometimes it's draining, but I do ramble, so I do apologize if I rambled too much in different times, but we get to the end point in the end.
You ramble, Emily. I never think you ramble. I think you're very, very open and honest about how you're feeling, and that's that's rare, especially with somebody like yourself who is.
I think that's a Cancerian thing.
That's a Cancerian. Okay, you said it. You're a Cancer. You're allowed to say it. I can't say that. It's definitely another conversation for another podcast.
Yeah, right. Emily, go and switch over to our other one.
Thank you so much for today. If there are listeners out there who want to get in touch with you, what is the best way?
Probably going through my tarot website, or my Instagram or TikTok or anything like that. Simply Luna Tarot. I think my website is quite literally simplylunatarot.com. I should really know what the handle is, but I think it's that. And I've got an email on there. So
what I'll do is I will post all your contact social media details in text. So if anyone does want to get hold of you, they've got all your details there. In any way. But you've been genuinely very open and honest. And thank you so much for this.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening. If anyone's listening, still, well done. Thank you.